Caste.
Sir,
Measures.
what are institutional measures?
Legal and
We have one NCW.
NCW.
We have some. Right.
National Commission for Women, Ministry of Women and Child Development.
Uh,
Then even you can talk about even NCPs here, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Next aspect is caste. Now when you look at this caste as an issue or caste as a feature of Indian society, it is deeply enrooted. It is deeply enrooted and it is spread across different spheres of life. Now when you talk about these social units or when you talk about these social interrelations or social interactions, you have caste coming in. When you have economic in the form of your occupational specializations or reservation of certain occupations for certain set of castes, you have caste coming in. Now when it comes to the political representation, you have a dominant role of your caste. Yes. When you talk about your education facilities, when you talk about your employment opportunities, you again have caste coming in. Now, when you look at the wide spread of caste as a phenomenon of Indian society, you find that it is deeply enrooted and it has a lot of historical basis. Now, when you look at caste as a system, basically it originated in the form of Varna system. Your Varna system, and as Varna system, it got later manifested into Jati system in later Vedic period. The crystallization of Jati system was basically seen in your later Vedic. Till then you had Varna system. Then in your later Vedic you had even this Panchama Varna coming in, the untouchables, the Panchamas. Then on later state we started, or later tendencies or later stages of history, we started to see there was a kind of support system that was given by your heterodox religion. Heterodox religion as a support system to the lower caste people or lower Varna people in order to get over the ritual obligations that are being imposed by the upper caste people, or the kind of expenses that are to be made by this lower caste people in the name of religious celebrations. Now, in order to get over such religious celebrations or religious offerings or religious obligations, this caste of the lower caste or lower Varna, they basically inclined towards the heterodox religions. That is your Buddhism and Jainism. And you would see that in later stages with respect to the community called as Mahars, who are considered as scheduled castes, you would see there is a movement called Neo-Buddhist movement coming up in your Maharashtra. Your Neo-Buddhist movement, which basically or which metamorphosized itself into a Dalit conscious movement, which later manifested in the form of Dalit Panther movement, and which basically gave a political representation to the Dalit community who are Mahars in Maharashtra. And you would find that this Dalit representation that was given to these people further led or further given a kind of force multiplier to the Dalit conscious that is spread across the different states. So when you look at caste as a phenomena, it is spread across history, it is spread across time, it is spread across space. Now show me one place in India where you don't have a caste system. Show me one community which does not have a caste system. Show me one religion which does not have a caste system. Show me one pocket or one region of India which does not have a caste system. Now, caste system is spread across time and space. It is spread across all religions. Your Islam has a caste, Khan, Pathan, all this. Your Christians have a caste. Basically, they talk about Syrian Christians. They talk about Syrian Christians. Now, your Sikhs have a caste, where basically the dominance of Sikh community was Esterly and Brahmin community. So you have a Sikh caste system. You have a Buddhist caste system. You have a Jainist caste system. Now, when you look at these different classifications or different segregations of the society on the basis of caste, now because of such a wide prevalence of this phenomena, it becomes extremely important for us to study. Study not only as part of Indian society, we also see across this class or across this time period when we are reading or when you are studying about caste, we would see that caste becomes a foundational aspect for most of your social issues. Now, when you talk about the marginal state or marginalization of scheduled caste is a resultant of caste system. The marginalization of Muslim minorities, the marginalization of scheduled tribes, it is basically a resultant of caste system. For instance, even the marginalization of women is a resultant of your caste system to an extent. So, for you to understand this caste system is extremely important. Now, when you look at caste system, you basically need to know the features of caste system. Features of caste system. Then what is the status? Now, under status, you will basically talk about the dynamics of caste system. Status or the dynamic.
Something about history also.
Yeah. I think whatever I have discussed, historical.
You could all some questions. So
Okay.
just put it in.
We can. But that aspect is anthropological aspect. I'll not say it is an aspect of Indian society. It's an anthropology aspect. Okay. Now the section for you is this. Not even this. This is also an anthropological perspective where your B.S. Gure basically gives 7 features of caste. That's an anthropology view. Okay.
So to better understand what actually caste is.
That's why I'm giving you features. Actually, no lecture gives you a features of caste. They directly jump into, in fact, they don't even discuss caste system. Take any Indian society class, they'll never discuss caste system. They'll directly jump into scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Now, this is the exam demand. That is the reason why I'm bringing in. Now, I think in my previous modules also, I did not discuss caste system in other institutes. Now, I started discussing this caste system in the recent past because from 2019 onwards, it started changing. Or they started bringing in this caste system. Okay. Now, when I was taken this module in 2017-18, I used to not discuss caste because I felt it was an area of anthropology. Okay. Now, when they started using words like obscurantism, when they started using this caste class conflicts, then I felt this is part of your Indian society. Status, dynamics, features. Then we have to see the consequences.
So you just threw some terms, right? Obscurantism. How do we get exposed to those terms?
Newspaper reading, paper reading.
I mean, given that you have some anthropological base, you can easily connect. Then
But
for us, it will be quite difficult.
yes, paper reading only. Whatever keyword base I have, anyway, I'm throwing it in the class. I'm not keeping anything with me, I'm just freely throwing it so that you can use it. But when it comes to your polity, IR, every section of the subject or every section of your syllabus has a keyword list. Okay, like what I have for Indian society, what I have for internal security, you will have even for your polity. Polity, you will have an extremely important set of keywords. Especially words like constitutionalism, positive, negative liberties, all these are supposed to be used there. Okay. Now, when you look at the features of caste, the first thing is, it is part of social system, or it is a structural aspect. It is a structural aspect, or it is part of social systems.
So what is the caste? Is it unique to India or?
No,
You don't have caste-based systems, and
you have even in Russia.
they do not call it castes, right? I mean, do they? I just want to
See, basically, they have a caste system. In anthropology, we study the origin theories of caste. There, one of the criticism, I think, in one of the thinkers basically classify this particular system as a system of India, or it originated in India. But their criticism is it is not only in India; we study even in Russia. So it is. I'll not say it is restricted only to India, but certain North American regions also have this caste as a system.
caste and class, both of them are different.
Yes, they are different. When you look at European segregation or European classification, Europe is mostly on the basis of class. But there are certain pockets of North America, there are certain pockets of Russia, there are certain pockets of Africa where you have this caste system, especially to those indigenous communities which are present. It is a structural aspect, it is part of your social system. Then it will have certain occupational specializations. That means whatever kind of occupational specialization, it is basically focusing on division of labor. Whatever kind of occupational specialization, it is focusing on division of labor. Division of labor. Then the third aspect is they have certain ritual privileges or religious privileges. They have certain ritual or religious privileges. They have certain religious or ritual privileges. One is occupational occupational specialization, ritual privileges, and it's a structural aspect. Now it also has certain aspect with respect to marriage regulations or intercaste marriages. Marriage regulations or intercaste marriages. Marriage regulations or intercaste marriages. Now, apart from these four features, you also have a restriction with respect to commingling or common dining phenomena. When it comes to dining practices, when you observe the dining practices between different castes, or this phenomenon of commingling between different castes, you would find there is a discrimination. Or the structural aspect of Indian society in the form of caste is being manifested in the form of degree of commingling or degree of intercaste interactions. Right? Now when you look at caste system, it is mostly all of these aspects. One is it is a structural aspect. Two, it is a occupational specialization with respect to division of labor. Three, it is with respect to the ritual or religious privileges in the form of different yagas, yagnas, or different pujas, where certain castes, or even with respect to the temple entry, or when you look into the temple entry movement of your Sri Narayan Guru, it might be Aravipuram movement of 1888, or it might be SNDP of 1902, or with respect to the temple entry movement or Vaikom Satyagraha of 1924, where KP Keshav Menon or Kellappan, you find that the fundamental reason behind any of those movements that were stirring up was an anti-caste movement. For that instance, even your self-respect movement, Ramaswamy Nayakar, the self-respect movement was also because to get rid of this ritual or religious privileges that are provided to certain sections of the community on the basis of caste as a structural aspect. Now, when you talk about the intercaste marriages or certain marital restrictions, there were again restrictions between two different castes cannot marry. And the fifth aspect is commingling or privileges. Now, if you have to evaluate the dynamics of caste system, you basically need to consider these five. This is your structure for the answer. This is your structure for the answer. Now, when we are evaluating the structure or when you are evaluating the dynamics of caste, generally 99% of the people will not have a structure. They'll go very random. They'll say it is shifting to class movement, intercaste marriages are allowed, then temple entry is allowed. But one thing I would tell you is, in talking about dynamics of caste, first mention the features of caste. You draw a flowchart like this, features of caste 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, finish. You'll know. Then write the changing dynamics as the subheading 1, 2, 3, 4 and evaluate each of this aspect. That is why I emphasize on saying structure is more important than content. And one trick about emphasizing on structure is, when you have structure, content automatically flows. It becomes very natural. Now, when you have a structure with respect to dealing with the causes of the marginalization of scheduled castes or marginalization of scheduled tribes or marginalization of women or persisting women issues, and that for you structure is social issues, political issues, economic issues, legal issues, technological issues. You automatically have a structure. Now, under social, it is very easy for you to remember what are social issues. You don't have health, you don't have education, it's a social issue. Or some issue with respect to marriage, you don't have. Or it is an issue, some aspect with respect to family, it has a social issue. Now you have political representation, fundamental rights, or human rights or natural rights, any of these. Your economic employment opportunities, economic productivity or resources. Now you are legal with respect to enforcement of laws, justice system. So you already got 10 points. That is a reason why if you have a structure, it is very easy for the content to fill. Now under these 5 headings, you write one point also, you have 5 points. My dear, for writing a 15 marker, because anyway it will have 2 to 3 sections, you would need hardly 5 to 6 points for each section, more than sufficient. And you don't have the leverage about writing more also. If you are writing 1 point extra here, that means you are going to lose one question at the end. If you write one extra point for each section, it is very certain you are going to leave 1 or 2 questions at the end. So instead of writing 8 points here, write 5 to 6 points. Because anyway you are not going to get, at max you can get half mark extra, but not like 3 or 4 marks. Right? So this is all about features. Now what is the status of caste system? The status or the dynamics of caste system. Status or dynamics. Status or dynamics. Now basically when you are looking or when you are talking about the status or dynamics of caste system, you basically have to evaluate the caste relations. I will not say caste system as such, but you are supposed to evaluate the caste relations. Now what do I mean by caste relations? I mean your marital relations with respect to caste, your religious or ritual relations with respect to caste, or your dining relations or intermingling relations with respect to caste. Now when you start evaluating the relations or in the context of caste between 2 people or 2 communities or 2 individuals, then you can talk about the dynamics of caste. Because dynamics of caste basically manifests in the changing relations. Yes, that is the true manifestation of dynamics of caste. Now if caste is getting stronger, or if the caste relations are getting stronger, that means there is going to be watertight compartment when it comes to intercaste marriages. Or intercaste marriage as a phenomenon is going to decline. Or the religious practices or ritual purification or the theory of ritual purity is going to be reinforced? Yes or no? The concept of purity and pollution, that is the basis for your caste system. That means some section of the society is considered as pure, some section is considered as polluted or polluted. Now these extremities or the objectification of these extremities in the society is what is manifested as caste system. And when your religious purity concept is being reinforced, don't you think the caste system is getting reinforced? So basically we need to evaluate what are the changing relations with respect to the dynamics of caste system. The first dynamic or the status is caste mobilization. Is caste mobilization. Now what do you mean by caste mobilization?
Changing of caste.
Changing caste from one to other. Now M.N. Srinivas basically calls this caste mobilization as the process of Sanskritization. Sanskritization.
So who's M.N. Srinivas?
He is a sociologist. You don't need to mention his name. Sanskritization. And please remember, whatever words I am giving here, they are not from anthropology, but they are from Indian society NCERT. Okay, now don't be in a misconception that I am talking about anthropology here. All these are words mentioned in your Indian society NCERT, and I am very careful about stating those words. That's why I did not talk about the concept of purity and pollution when I was talking about features, because it is the Louis Dumont view of caste system, and Levi-Strauss concept of structuralism was used in explaining the Indian features of caste system. I did not talk about it because it is anthropological view. Whatever is common between your anthropology and Indian society only I am going to write here. Because it should not appear to the examiner that an anthropology fellow is writing this answer. That we need to be very careful, right? Because if such kinds of specialization is shown, then we will be penalized. We will be penalized. We are not supposed to be extra special when you are writing general studies answer. That's why it is general studies. See, there are a lot of inherent contradictions, nothing to worry. Okay. You all get used to it when you start giving your attempts. So it is all about Sanskritization. Sanskritization basically means the lower caste people, when they want to emulate the practices of higher caste. This process of emulation or this process of replication or this process of copying of different cultural religious practices of the higher caste by your lower caste is what is called as Sanskritization. It is not going to be a structural change, but it is going to be merely a positional change. Now he is in a perception, he is in a view that he is copying the religious or cultural practices of an higher caste, so that I will become an higher caste. But when you look at the social or the structural aspect, he is not actually turning into the higher caste, but he is just replicating the practices of higher caste or higher varna. This is one aspect or one changing dynamic. Now one classic example is you have your Bengali Brahmins. Yes, actually they wear this Upanayana, but they belong to a scheduled caste community. They belong to scheduled caste community and they started emulating the practices of the Brahmins of Bengal. They don't eat non-veg, they stop eating non-veg. Okay, so that kind of emulations. Fish is a vegetable. Yeah, I think it's as per their environmental conditions there or their availability. Bengali meal without rice and fish, or if you're offering food to your Bengali without rice and fish, it's utter disgrace. And aloo for North Indians. Bengali also. Caste mobilizations. Then the second dynamic is inter-caste marriages.
So does it come under caste mobilization?
No. Because when you look at inter-caste marriage, it is more of a structural change.
Under caste mobilization, we've only discussed Sanskritization.
Yes. I'm not going deeper.
No need to go deep.
No need to go deeper. If you are able to mention the word caste mobilization, examiner will search for you and he'll come running with a garland, I'm telling you. To felicitate you. Arey Babu, he wrote caste mobilization, enough, let me give marks. Because most of the people will lack this key terminology in Indian society. That is one drawback with respect to aspirants writing answers on Indian society. Now, like how you people are very comfortable in writing GS2 answers, anthropology people will be very comfortable in writing Indian society answers. Because our paper 2 is mostly Indian society, at least half the syllabus, not half the, most of the syllabus. We study about tribals in deep. So any question on tribals, we'll be ready to answer, we'll be excited to answer. Okay. The next dynamic is intercaste marriage. Intercaste marriages. Now when you look at the prevalence or the phenomena of intercaste marriages, basically they are on rise. They are on rise. What are the reasons? Urbanization, industrialization, globalization, modernization, westernization, transportation, all Asians. Right? Transportations. So all these kinds are basically reason for your intercaste marriages. Because when you look at all this phenomena, what it is changing? It is changing basically the intermingling or the degree of intermingling between two different castes, two different communities. Now, for example, you go to a restaurant or you go to a coffee shop, where coffee shop is considered the breeding ground for budding lovers. Yes. That's what, no, I think Coffee Days tagline is it's more than a coffee, something. I don't remember.
Pizza Hut is more than a pizza.
No, but Coffee Day is also something like that. I don't remember. Okay. Now when you go to such public places, you cannot discriminate, my dear, you belong to this caste, show me your ID card, I'll make you sit here. Then nobody will enter that shop. Yes. The basic MSP or the marketing selling proposition of any today's business is the customer treatment or the customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction. Now when you look at your stand-up comedies, most of the content of stand-up comedies is the behavior of the waiter in an hotel or the behavior of the manager in an hotel. Why? Because the MSP of today's restaurant or today's business is customer satisfaction. Now don't you think that objective of customer satisfaction has changed the intermingling relations of caste? Now when it has changed the intermingling relations of caste because of urbanization, industrialization, modernization, westernization and globalization, don't you think there is a greater scope and increasing scope for intercaste marriages? Point number 1. Point number 2, and we have seen modernization is more of an ideological tendencies. It is more of an ideological changes. Ideas of freedom, ideas of liberty, ideas of justice, ideas of equality, ideas of choice, ideas of expression, ideas of individualism. All this basically nurtured the concept of intercaste marriages. Right? This is one trend, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in his book Annihilation of Caste. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in his book Annihilation of Caste, he states that the future of Indian caste, he states, I dream of Indian society and the future of Indian caste to be caste-ridden society, and this caste-ridden society is only possible with the promotion of intercaste marriages. Now that is the point where there was a conflict between the caste system approach with respect to your Gandhiji and with respect to Ambedkar. Ambedkar says, or Ambedkar promotes intercaste marriages as a tool to get rid of all of these caste oppressions, or to get rid of all the systems of caste discrimination, to get rid of the structural aspect of caste in the Indian society. But when you talk about Mahatma Gandhi's or his perception of caste. He says the future of Indian caste or the Indian society or the position of caste in the Indian society. I condemn all the caste discrimination. But let us not completely get rid of caste system, but let us transform the caste system into Varna system. He basically emphasizes on the advantage of Varna system with respect to occupational specializations, with respect to social stability, with respect to economic opportunities that can be provided to each of the Varna if you are shifting from caste to Varna system. And Varna provides a scope for your occupational specialization, occupational secrets, promotion of occupational secrets. And trust me, Gandhiji was a hardcore caste follower. He was a hardcore caste follower. Now, in order to, with all due respects to the contributions of Mahatma to Indian nation, when you look at Gandhiji's contributions or Gandhiji's strategy of independence, it had a pattern. What is that pattern?
Connecting the masses.
Connecting the masses. Okay, that is using religion. It had a pattern. You find the era of Gandhi starting from 1915 when he returned, 16. Then 1917 he starts Champaran. You're somewhere there. Struggle and truce. Struggle and truce, yes, that is true. Basically, he says struggle and truce is a phenomenon or is a concept for endurance of a national movement to sustain for longer periods. But when you look at the pattern of Mahatma Gandhi, it was very strategic, my dear. He was not so simple like what he appeared in dhotis and with a danda, but his strategy was 1917 he takes or he brings in Satyagraha, a localized Satyagraha, Champaran, Ahmedabad, Kheda. Now he has run a pilot study there. What did he do? He ran a pilot study of masses or disobedience, pilot study of hunger strike, yes, pilot study of non-cooperation. He has done it. See here, Champaran, Ahmedabad, Kheda, all were just the sequence: non-cooperation, civil disobedience and that hunger. Right? Then, in 1919, he says, or he sees, if I join Muslims with me, then my launch into the independence movement is going to be very easy. Because when he brings in Muslims along, or when he unifies Hindus and Muslims together as part of your Khilafat, and when he was made the member of Khilafat committee, don't you think the perception of Gandhi is going to be little more refined? It is going to be a inclusive kind of movement. And you will consider him as a person who is little more inclusive with respect to the religious perspective. Yes. Now he launches Khilafat. Now it is very clear that Gandhiji already knew that Khilafat is going to be doomed one day. Because it is like bringing
Two things which don't come together.
which don't come together into one basket, which always repel. And it is very certain that it will repel in such a force that the basket itself breaks. And he was very sure of it. Now what did he do? He brought 1919 Khilafat. After 1919 Khilafat, now he wanted a launch into the market of national freedom. Now he brought Rowlatt Satyagraha. And Rowlatt Satyagraha is considered as the first hunger strike all India wide. Now why the Rowlatt Satyagraha was so successful? Because he was perceived as a man who was looking for or who looked for inclusive society, inclusive independence movement, taking everybody along. Now, before Gandhi itself, you had number of people struggling for mass movement. What was your Swadeshi? What was your home rule? Yes, Swadeshi, home rule 1898. Don't you think 1885, itself was an institutionalization for the promotion of independence movement, although it had a different objectives. Now all of these people could not pass because they lacked this perception of inclusiveness. Now Gandhiji plays a masterstroke in the form of Khilafat. Then suddenly he launches Rowlatt. Then with Rowlatt he takes the momentum and launches non-cooperation. And in non-cooperation also, when you observe, he doesn't continue it always. He said 1922, let me break it. Why? Because any activity of masses, it demands a lot of discipline. Now when you look at NCM, it was such a movement where all the masses or all the anger of the people was left free. My dear, you enjoy, you butcher these fellows. Now Gandhiji already knew that when I let free the mad monkey which was put in the cage, it is going to be little more madder outside. Now what he takes? He takes the chance of Chauri Chaura and says, let me pull it back. Now when he pulled it back, so many were disappointed. So many were disappointed. Now he says, Arey, what this Buddha is doing? He came, he told mass movement, now he suddenly in 2 years he is calling us back. Then how will we get freedom? Or how will we get independence movement? Now there was crisis for Gandhiji because they started coming up with Swarajist party, separate entry into legislative councils. Now he cleverly plays a masterstroke again, 1924 temple entry movement. 1924 temple entry movement. He goes and supports Vaikom Satyagraha. What business this man has to go to Kerala? What business he has? Now why again Kerala is a strategic point? Because in 1921 you have Mopilla revolt taking place. There your Hindus and Muslims are fighting. Now Gandhiji, as a man who is bearing this tag or brand of inclusive man or inclusive ideologist, he goes and sits there and he settles it down. Settles it down. So one arrow, two birds. So when you look at Gandhiji's pattern, when all the momentum in the independence movement was ready, he brought in something called as mass movement. When all of them were seen to be jobless, when all of them were seen to be tired of this mass movement, he comes up with Harijanodharana, or working for the upliftment of untouchables. This is the common trend you observe. Then in 1930, again untouchability. Yes, 32 again, salt satyagraha, CDM. Then again 34, or as part of your Pune Pact. Then again he tries to bring in or unify this depressed class. Now he sat on hunger strike against the separate electorate. Why separate electorate? Now again he wanted to maintain this perception of inclusion. Now 34 again he says this. Then 37. Then 39. Yes. Then suddenly he launches Quit India. So his pattern of struggle, true struggle, was that is why he is called as father of nation. It was strategically utilized during struggle period. He called it as mass movement. During truce period, he called it as Harijanodharana. He wanted or he worked for the upliftment of Harijans. Basically, Gandhiji was a workaholic. He didn't want to sit quiet. Now during struggle period, anyway people are working, so let me give leadership and let me give the intellectual backup for all of these people so that they can strive to their potentials. Now to whatever society that was downtrodden, to whatever society that was lacking any kind of intellectual capabilities or any kind of intellectual opportunities, now he comes up and says this. Now Ambedkar severely criticizes Gandhi over his movements of untouchability. He severely criticizes. I'll not say criticism, severe criticism it is.
Political man.
Severe criticism. Right?
So, but his ideology was different.
Whose?
Gandhiji was waiting for getting independence, but Ambedkar was he was struggling for upliftment of the Dalit section.
My dear, you please remember that at the end of the day, any freedom fighter, I'll not say only freedom fighter, any member who belonged to that era of independence movement, there was only one objective for each of them: emancipation. Emancipation. For some, it was emancipation of women. For some, it was emancipation of Muslims. For some, it was emancipation of lower class. For some, it was emancipation of worker class. For some, emancipation of communist ideologies. For some, it is emancipation of socialist ideologies. For some, it was emancipation of the colonial rule. Now, when we are studying, we basically emphasize on that section of the society or that section of people who basically emphasized on the emancipation of colonial rule. Now, what do you think your 1920 is? Your 1920 formation of All India Trade Union Congress was basically for the emancipation of the struggles of labor. Your 1934 formation of Congress Socialist Party by your Acharya Narayan Dev and Jayaprakash Narayan was basically to look into the emancipation of socialist ideology. Your Salt Satyagraha was basically an emancipation of lower sections of the society. Now, it was such that the emancipation from colonial rule was a little more broader aspect or broader perspective. Now, what was your 1906? It was Muslim League. Now, your 1906 Muslim League was basically struggling for emancipation of Muslims as a community. What is your Jinnah 14-point theory? Emancipation as a counter to your 1928 Nehru's report. Then 1940s declaration. 1946, the day of action. Or 1939. All of these events were emancipation of Muslim as a community. The only difference is the freedom fighters basically had a broader perspective about national movement. But the other parts of the people or the other sections of the people had comparatively a narrow perspective. But the objective was emancipation. Now for Ambedkar, it was objective with respect to the emancipation of depressed classes. Right? This is what you understand by broader understanding of history. Now, when you have that broader understanding of history, it is not about reading more books, it is only just thinking on what happened and why it happened. Now, when you have such broader understanding, it is very easy for you to answer conceptual questions in history. Now, this year, most of the people struggled to evaluate the Curzon's policies. It was a 10 marker. And I think that was the first question which I wrote in the exam this year. Because that question did not only demand knowing about the different policies that were implemented by Curzon, but you also needed to know the impact. You also needed to know whether that was successful or not successful. Now, when you look at the Curzon policy, it was not successful. To an extent successful, because your 1902 Rayleigh Commission, or with respect to your Universities Act 1902, was a kind of changing trends with respect to your higher education. That was partially successful. But when you look at your 1905 partition of Bengal, the annulment. Now, partition of Bengal was also a little bit successful because on the basis of partition of Bengal, you had your 1906 Benares session, where they declared the Swadeshi movement. Now, with respect to the motto and the regions of spread of Swadeshi movement, or the conflict which led to 1907 Surat split. Now, don't you think Surat split 1907, Surat split was an inherent consequence of partition of Bengal of 1905? Yes or no? Now, 1907 Surat split basically led to weakening of Congress. Now, when it led to the weakening of Congress in 1907, your 1909 they play a master stroke by bringing in Morla Minto reforms. And in 1909 Morla Minto reforms, what do? They basically start placating the moderate section of the Congress. So that they'll use this moderate section of the society or moderate section of Congress against extremists. But the partition of Bengal was a failure because of the 1911 annulment? This is how you are supposed to evaluate. This is how you are supposed to understand. Right? Believe me, I used to hate to read history. For my first attempt, I just read it as a subject. But I think before my interview, I had a lot of time and I was getting bored, and I took that Bipin Chandra, Struggle for Independence, that fat book, yellow color book. Then I got interest. And it is very interesting if you start interlinking things like this. Now history is all about story. I have told you all story from 1905 to 1947. Yes. It had all the conceptual understanding. It had the participation of Gandhi. It had the participation or struggle for Dalits. It's all story. Right? The second trend was the interchange or intercaste marriages. Now the concept of intercaste marriages are increasing. Then the next changing aspect is occupational diversity. Occupational diversity. Occupational diversity. Now when you talk about this occupational diversity, it said we have seen that caste system was basically a structural feature which had certain occupational specializations. But when we look at certain affirmative actions, for example your reservation, we find that the lower sections or the lower caste started to participate in highest levels of administration. Yes. So because of such positive affirmative actions by the government, or because of certain Dalit conscious movements, like your Dalit Panther movement, they started to diversify their occupational base. Now when they started to diversify their occupational base, it further led to the economic empowerment of the lower sections. So the third dynamic with respect to caste system is occupational diversity, and occupational diversity as a resultant of positive affirmative action. Occupational diversity as a matter of or as a consequence of positive affirmative action. Is this clear? Now the fourth dynamic is shift towards class system. The fourth dynamic is shift towards class system. Shift towards class system. Now the fundamental shift or the metamorphosis of the importance or the emphasis of the Indian society started to happen from caste to class. And the fundamental reason behind this is urbanization, modernization, westernization, industrialization, all this. Because when you look at all of these phenomena, somewhere or the other there is a lot of emphasis with respect to economic sphere of life rather than social sphere of life. Now when you look at your previous or the historical references with respect to this caste system, you would see there was prevalence of something called as Jajmani system. Now when you talk about Jajmani system, your Jajmani system was more a social connotation which was reinforcing this inter-caste relations. Now the dominant caste of that particular region will be a Jajman or will be the head, and there will be a serving caste which are surrounded by him. For example, Dhobi. For example, say some washer or some domestic servant, somebody who is providing wood, somebody who is providing certain metal crafts. Now this kind of relation which is manifested in the form of Jajmani system, it basically emphasized the social connotation or social manifestations of your caste. So when you look at past systems or past systems of engagement between different sections, it greatly had a social connotation. It greatly had a social connotation. Now when you have a greater emphasis on social connotation, for example, when you take agriculture, you needed manual power to plow. Now when you needed manual power to plow, it basically became an activity of men and male activity. Now when it became a male activity, it is very obvious that the male members of the society are going to dominate. Now when you have a domination that is being given or that is being pretended by the male section of the society, then you have your patriarchy creeping into the society. That means, although it was an economic activity, but there was a greater emphasis that was given for the social understanding, social setup and social connotation of that particular economic activity. That's why when you see your agricultural communities, they are mostly patriarchal in nature. Whereas when you see your pastoral communities, they are mostly matriarchal in nature. Or when you see your horticulture societies, they are mostly matriarchal in nature. This relation of social connotation or the social connotation of any economic activity previously was, there was certain relations and it had a lot of social connotation or social understanding for any economic activity. But when you look at the changing trends and when you look at the onset of urbanization, industrialization, modernization, westernization, transportation, all this phenomena, the economic sphere of life started to be emphasized on a greater extent. Now when the economic sphere of the life started to emphasize on a greater extent, now it is very certain all these dynamics are supposed to happen. And it is very certain that the caste, which is a social dimension, which had certain economic outcomes, which had certain economic outfalls, is going to be diminished with respect to its relevance in the Indian society, because whatever kind of activity we are doing, we are emphasizing more on the economic nature. We are emphasizing more on the economic sphere. So the word which is, or the classification which is very close to the economic understanding is not caste, but it is class. Is this clear? Is this clear? Now that is the reason why the changing dynamic from caste to class.
So coming back to this occupational
Yes.
diversity,
Mhm.
we observe that among the lower kind of jobs, blue collar jobs,
Lower
there is
caste.
still a particular
One example you can talk about something called as manual scavenging.
exactly, sir. That's where I wanted to know. So Bejawada Wilson had this entire
Mhm.
research done on them. So how occupational diversity, while it is increasing on the upper levels, it is still being
Stagnant on the, yes.
lower rungs. So
That we'll see as a caste issue with respect to scheduled castes. But we are just discussing about the changing trends. Now when you look at the changing trend, I will not say it is a universal phenomena, occupational diversity, but it's a changing trend or it's a dynamic. If I say manual scavenging as a phenomena or as a job is not present in today's India, it's a wrong statement. It's absolutely a wrong statement. It's highly conclusive and extreme statement. But I'm saying only that there is a changing occupational diversity, or there is basically changing nature of occupations when it comes to the scheduled caste. Although you have their perceived traditional caste occupations prevalent, but still there are diversification. For example, when you look at bureaucracy, there is a lot of entry of scheduled castes. When you look at your formal jobs, there is a lot of entry of scheduled castes. When you look at your software engineers, you have scheduled castes.
Sir, also can we say the dynamics regarding to urban and rural areas? In urban areas, there is emergence of class system, but in rural areas, it's still not.
You can talk about it. You can talk about it. You can give that point also. That is also very relevant. You can say that rural Indias are still traditional setup, traditional societal setup. You are Reddy, Kamma, Kapu dominating. Because, what did I say? I said, whatever kind of traditional systems we have, we had a lot of social connotations, social understandings. and we emphasized a lot with respect to social understandings and social connotation of a particular activity. Why do you think an intercaste marriage is a taboo in village system? Because when you look at Indian villages, it is a networked system. A person who is 1 kilometer away from the same village, suppose if a baby is born, he'll know, or whole of the village will know. If that baby's hand gets fractured, or little finger gets fractured, then everybody else will know. అరే వాడి చిటికన వేలు ఇరిగిపోయిందంట, అయ్యయ్యో బాబు. Everybody will come and see as if something great happened. Indian villages are a networked systems. Now when you consider Indian villages as a network systems, and we have seen that the main reason behind Indian villages being network system is their social understandings are very similar. Now still you have villages where you have a dominant caste prevailing. For example, still you have a clustered settlements in your villages, where whole of the cluster will be occupied by one caste, and the fringes or somewhere in the outer regions will be occupied by a lower caste, or the core of the village is occupied by the higher caste and the fringes of the village is occupied by lower caste. Now this kind of prevalence of traditional system in village, or village as as a networked system, the fundamental reason is they have a social understanding, or they have a connect of social connotation. Now if they perceive marriage as one system, everybody in that village will have marriage as that particular system only. Now in order to break that system, it is very difficult, because we have seen village as a networked system. Now if I try to break, all other people will come and break me. Yes. They may not break me physically, but socially they'll break me. Are help. They'll have a kind of social boycott. Now whatever kind of repercussions that you're supposed to face from the society in a village, people are feared of facing such situations. Now that is a reason, and in order to avoid such social repercussions, or in order to avoid such social sanctions which are silently imposed by the members of the village in the phenomena of network systems, the people of village, they are basically feared of breaking that social system there. That is why still you have the traditional nature of Indian social system prevalent in Indian villages. But whereas in urban areas, you don't know what is happening next door. Yes, you don't know what is happening next door. Till your next door happens to be a terrorist and you have some NIA operations, till that point you will not know that all the bombs were being manufactured next to you.
So can we say individualism, in the future at least, individualism as a solution to the caste?
No, certainly not.
Because they don't interconnect with each other and ultimately.
Certainly not. And please remember, theoretically we can say we need to run for caste-ridden society, or there should not be any caste in the society. But there are a number of sociologists, there are a number of reports which state that India as a system or as a nation will fail if caste system fails. The fundamental reason is we have around 70% of the people living in villages. Now you believe, say if we have anticipated that 50% is going to be urbanized by 2040, right? Now that means, do you think their ideology is going to be urbanized? No. It is just their standards of living. It is just their physical parameters, or it is their tangible aspect of their life is going to change and get urbanized. Yes. Now big DIGs, IGs, police commissioners. They look for, you just open your this matrimonial advertisements in your newspaper on Sunday. We want Kapu girl, fair, tall, 5'6", 5'7", something they'll say. Only Kapu girl, okay, or Kamma girl, or Reddy girl, or Brahmin girl, whatever. And down, so and so, designation IAS, IPS, IRS, IFS. Why? These people are not urbanized. They are urbanized. But where is the caste system? It is still prevalent. That's why here Yogendra Singh, he says, I cannot dream of India without a caste system. Or the future of Indian caste cannot be anticipated in India because India cannot be dreamt of a caste-ridden society or a system without any caste.
I think Sanskritization would help it to a certain
No.
extent.
Certainly not.
Practices of
See, theoretical understanding is different. Now, when you start reading little more literature on caste system and certain philosophical aspects of caste system, and there are a number of Harvard studies on Indian caste system. Harvard studies on Indian caste system. It's not that easy.
Sir, as far as rural India and caste is concerned, there's a news 2 days back from my district where the Sarpanch is a candidate from SC community and he has been boycotted by the community, the upper class community, upper caste community of my particular village. So, what the constitution gives them the rights to be representative of people. Now, where there is a mistake, what could be done to address these kind of issues?
What could be done? Now, when you talk about villages or Indian villages, now the understanding of Gandhiji and understanding of Ambedkar also differed with respect to Indian villages. Now, when you talk about the Gandhiji's or Gandhian understanding of Indian villages, he says the future of India lies in Indian villages. The future of India lies in Indian villages, and he dreams of something called as model village or Adarsh Gram. I think this year finance or your economic survey document basically emphasizes on creating an Adarsh Gram through aspirational districts program. So the Gandhian view of Indian villages was it can create the future of India, or the future of India lies in Indian villages. But contrary to this, Ambedkar says, my dear, Indian villages are dens of ignorance. They are dens of ignorance, and it is a bundle of superstition. They are dens of ignorance and bundle of superstition. Now, when you go for a realistic survey, when you look at Gandhian view of Indian villages, it was more of an economic aspect. It was more of an economic aspect in the sense, the fundamental advantage of any village is its market, is its demography, or is its aspirations to change their present standard of living. That is why he says the future of India lies in the future of villages. And very strategically, Mahatma Gandhi emphasizes on the philosophy of trusteeship. He emphasizes on the philosophy of Sarvodaya. Why? Now, when he was seeing the future of India in Indian villages, what was the need for Mr. Mahatma Gandhi to emphasize on Sarvodaya and Antyodaya? Because unless and until you give an helping hand in the form of capitalism, in the form of capitalists, or in the form of Gandhi's talisman, you cannot see the future of India in Indian villages. Gandhi ji also knew that Indian villages are not so capable of it. And in order to realize the dream of future of India lying in Indian villages, We need Sarvodaya. We need Antyodaya. We need an implementation in your policies through something called as Gandhi's talisman. And we need trusteeship. Right? We need an inherent social contract between the capitalist class and the rural class or the worker class. So that whatever your capitalist class is earning, he says earning money is not wrong or it's not a sin. But you need to show a form of responsibility towards the society. And he has dreamt of this responsibility that is being shown by our capitalists in the form of trusteeship. Now with this trusteeship, he realized that he can get an helping hand to pull up all the ignorant faces of Indian villages so that he can see the future of Indian villages or the future of India in Indian villages. Now Ambedkar was not using such a buttery language. Such a flowery language he did not use. Now when you start connecting the dots of the philosophy of Gandhi, you would see all this. Start connecting Sarvodaya, start connecting future of India, start connecting Adarsh Gram, start connecting Antyodaya, start connecting trusteeship, start connecting this talisman, and look all of these concepts in the 7 sins he has given. Gandhiji's 7 sins. Now when you start connecting all these concepts of Gandhiji and connect them and view in the telescope of the 7 sins what Gandhiji has given, you will truly understand the philosophy of Gandhi or Gandhian philosophy. Now Gandhian philosophy is not as simple as it seems. Now but whereas Ambedkar, Dr. Ambedkar, he was little more direct in it. He said, Arey Babu, villages are, you have bundles of superstition filled there and what you are seeing future there. But Gandhi did not say it like that. He said, future of India lies in future of villages. Okay. So one thing that you are supposed to observe is the social awareness and the social awakening mechanism of Indian villages have to be worked upon. And when you are supposed to work upon the social awakening and social awareness systems or social awareness campaigns of Indian villages, that is not the job of government, please remember. That is not the job of the government, but that is the job of we the citizens. We the citizens, either you might be a civil society organization, or you might be a non-governmental organization, or you might be a charitable trust, or you might be as an individual who is taking individual social responsibility in spreading the awareness about the changing social trends and shaping the fabric of Indian villages in such a manner that it is fitting into the changing social trends. Now when you look at other areas, they talk about social awareness, they talk about social enlightenment, they talk about social empowerment, they talk about freedom, they talk about fundamental rights, they talk about constitutionalism. But in 2021 also, you are talking about boycotting a scheduled caste panchayat head. That basically shows that we are not aware about our preamble, our constitutional principles. Because that candidate who has been elected from that SC constituency or scheduled caste constituency, he is not there for fun. He is basically utilizing whatever constitution has provided to him in the form of reservation, in the form of affirmative action through your article 243D. Now I think we have discussed about proxy constituencies. No? Acha, I think I talked in different this thing. Okay, not you people. Now when you look at these scheduled caste constituencies, they are mostly proxy constituencies. Why? As per the mechanism of local governance, you will have a scheduled caste candidate. But when you look at the force behind the functioning of that particular constituency, will be a dominant caste candidate. Whether Reddy, Kamma, Kapu, any of this. Okay. So that instance of social boycott, basically it is with respect to the levels of social ignorance, and it is with respect to the failure of social awakening mechanism. Now when you look at the policy directives, or when you look at the perspective planning or Soviet model of planning which India incorporated in the form of 5-year plans, one of the failures was this. Because till your first 6 plans, they realized growth as a model. And they realized growth as a model and they said it is going to trickle down. Where it is going to trickle down? Where it has trickled down? And after 6th 5-year plan, they realized that, my dear, what we have done till now? We have wasted 20-30 years thinking that whatever growth that is being seen by the upper section, it is going to trickle down to the marginal sections or lower sections or the weaker sections or the rural sections. But it did not happen. Then that is the reason why your post 6th or 5th 5-year plan, they started shifting towards developmental mechanisms. Now when they started shifting to developmental mechanism as part of your 5-year plan, they realized the sections of the society or the marginal sections or the lower sections are so dumb that they are not able to realize a developmental mechanism as a developmental mechanism. Now they are not aware or they don't have the capacities of accepting whatever developmental mechanism your India is giving or whatever kind of welfare mechanism India is giving. We are building schools, but they are so dumb to access to the school to make their children study. Instead of making their children study, they are dropping them out and keeping them on field. Now that is the reason why in your 10th 5-year plan, they emphasizes on something called as human resource development. They realized whatever kind of general developmental mechanisms we derive, it is not going to happen or it is not going to manifest. But we need to basically develop your HRD, human resource development. And with that move of human resource development in your 10th 5-year plan, the foundations for inclusive growth came into picture. The foundation for inclusive growth came into picture. Then your 11th 5-year plan theme became inclusive growth. Then they realized that we have the motto of inclusive growth, but the rate of change of inclusive growth or rate of penetration of inclusive growth is extremely slow. Then your 12th 5-year plan realized we have to make it faster, safer, inclusive growth. Right? This is how we interlink. This is how we are supposed to interlink. Now I took from caste to Indian villages, I took to governance, then I came to economy. Now we'll get back to caste. Okay. Now once you know this art of interlinking, my dear, this exam is a cakewalk. It's a cakewalk. Now you yourself must be perplexed that in caste system and Indian villages, do we have so much to understand? And I bet you 99% of the faculty will not give you why the transition of 5-year plans happened actually. Why they have gone for inclusive growth as a theme in your 12th and 11th 5-year plan. I bet you 99.9% of the faculty will not understand by themselves. Unless and until provided he has done a PhD in his economics and he has done some thesis with respect to the developmental mechanism or with respect to perspective planning section of economy. You basically need to understand, just connect the dots, everything will get linked. And when you just look at the Indian society and when you just look at the persisting social issues, now it was very logical for them to shift towards growth, from growth to development, from development to inclusive growth. Now, when they started to uplift 271 million people out of poverty in just a decade, now when you see your maternal mortality rate reducing from 166 to 113, now when you start seeing your infant mortality rate reducing from 68 to 37, don't you think it is trending or India is moving towards inclusive growth? Don't you think India is moving towards sustainable growth? Now when India is moving towards inclusive growth, when India is moving towards sustainable growth, what purpose does the policy still have to emphasize on inclusive growth? That is the reason why they want to transcend to something called as happiness index of the society. Because the ultimate objective of any policy directive is to ensure the happiness in the society, which was categorically emphasized by our Kautilya's Arthashastra, saying what? The happiness of the king lies in the happiness of the subjects, or the welfare of the king lies in the welfare of the subjects, with his Saptanga theory. Now that is the reason Why, as a proactive policy making here, Madhya Pradesh has come up with the Department of Happiness? Is this clear? Is this clear? That is the reason why they started to come up with Global Happiness Index. That is the reason why your Bhutan as a country is lot of advocacy, or it has providing lot of advocacy for promoting Global Happiness Index. Why? Because we have reached, or we have understood the principles or the outcomes or the consequences of realizing an inclusive growth or inclusive society is that ultimately the happiness of the individual. Now, when we are working for inclusive growth, why let's not work for a broader perspective of happiness? Is this clear? Now, I have touched about certain governance aspects also. Right?
Happiness had a connotation with caste too.
Huh?
When you connected caste with happiness.
Sir, any threats to the status and dynamics?
Any threats?
Like we have been seeing recently, like honor killings.
We'll discuss. Now we'll discuss the caste oppressions. Okay. So we have seen the dynamics. The next one is consequences. Consequences.
So, are there any tips and tricks to compartmentalize the entire subject? Like your generally history, geography, all of them are pretty much dispersed. Do you follow any technique to compartmentalize it?
No, in my first attempt, I had this compartmental approach only. Then, first attempt, basically, we try emphasizing on knowledge gathering. Now, once you have worked hard for 10 to 12 hours every day, it is more than sufficient for you to cover all of the syllabus in 1 year, including your optional. Now, one thing I used to ensure across my periods or even today is that I ensure at least 10 hours of study. At least 10 hours of study. Now, you might think that, sir, you have pretty decent knowledge background. Now, what you study for 10 hours? Now, I sit and read some Yojana, or I sit and read some magazine, or I sit and read some broader understandings or perspectives. And I ensure that 10 hours of study in order to not lose my habit of studying 10 hours. Because till your name appears in the final list, or after appearing in the final list also, till your service is allocated to you, you cannot leave that habit of 10 hours study. Because once you are allocated, say if I am allocated IRS, it is very certain that I will give my next attempt. Yes, because I want IPS, it is not IRS. So, ensuring that 10 hours of study is very important. I think I told you the formula of C equals to C. Commitment equals to confidence. Commitment equals to confidence. And in order to get that kind of commitment, it is only your number of hours of study. Sir, you might think you sit in front of book and doze off or sleep, then also 10 hours is counted. No. I'll say 10 hours of qualitative study. You sleep, don't sleep, you eat, don't eat, but you ensure. If you're even thinking about the syllabus, that is what is considered as studying, my dear, in this. That is the beauty of civil services. It is not like your engineering, it is not like a degree exam where you have to take out a book and then only read. Now I tell you, all these generalizations are my washroom homework. Trust me, I'm telling you, I'm being open with you. Whatever kind of generalizations or whatever kind of broader perspectives I'm talking about, they are all my homework that I have done in the washroom times. I'm being a little shameless about talking my washroom times, but that is what I do.
So you're facing
Not only utilizing, because for some people, early morning it's a very good time. For some people, before sleeping, it's a very good time to think. Now ensure, unless and until you introspect on the syllabus, unless and until you introspect on the interconnections that you're supposed to bring into the exam, you cannot bring them. And I challenge you, 99% of the faculty in the market will never give you these interlinkages. On records. On records. And I think you must be having necessary experience till now from past 1 year. %99 of the faculty will not give you these interlinkages because they are threatened or they are feared that their market will be lost somewhere. First thing. Second thing, most of them do not know. Most of them do not know how to interlink planning with the social systems. They'll see planning as an economic connotation only. They'll see what your first 5-year plan told, what your second 5-year plan told, what your third 5-year plan told, but they'll not tell you why your first and second 5-year plan told in that way only. Did they tell you? Few cases they'll tell you, but not whole of your planning. Now when you look at your planning era, it can be safely divided into 3 types or 3 stages. Not only growth, all this. With respect to policy making also, when you look at the last phase of policy making, it was mostly driven with respect to innovative governance. It was driven with respect to innovative governance or compassionate governance. We'll discuss about different terms in governance tomorrow's class, tomorrow afternoon. Okay. So this interlinking is extremely important. Now when you know this interlinking, you don't need any book to be referred also. You just need to by heart your current affairs. Wherever you want to intersperse them. That's it. Now when I understand the concept of transition from growth to development to inclusive growth to happiness, now what I did, I just know a current affair that Madhya Pradesh has incorporated or come up with Ministry of Happiness. So when I add that current affair fact, it becomes contemporary. Now behind this contemporary stating of this particular, it is basically my understanding. That is what you are supposed to do in this exam. That's it. At least as per the written part, that's it. Interview, I am not a correct person. I will not say. Okay. Social discrimination, stereotyping. Then conflicts. Caste conflicts. Caste conflicts.
Superiority.
Conflicts.
Or marginalization of few sections. Skewed economic development, yes. The consequence of skewed economic development is only marginalization. Or skewed economic development, you can write. Apart from caste conflicts, you have caste oppressions. You have caste oppressions. Caste oppressions or caste violences. Caste oppression or caste violence. Now when you look at this phenomena of caste violence or caste oppressions, don't you think this caste oppressions or caste violence is an antidote to the changing caste dynamics?
Oppression is an antidote.
Now, I mean, when you find in a particular society that the caste dynamics are changing or the inter-caste relations are changing, what generally comes into play? The traditional elements. The traditional fringe elements coming into play and saying, hey, you my dear, please don't dare to change the inter-caste relations. Now, if you start fiddling with intercaste relations, we'll fiddle with you. That is what is meant by caste oppressions. Now, this caste oppression is manifested in the form of caste violences. Yes, these caste oppressions are being manifested in the form of caste violences. And caste violences like your mob lynching, like your rapes, like your Kaap panchayats. Don't you think Kaap panchayat is an institutionalization of caste oppression? Or economic exploitation. Economic exploitation in the form of manual scavenging when it comes to your lower caste sections or when it comes to the untouchables. So you have different forms of manifestations of caste oppressions. Caste oppression can be violence, can be exploitation, can be crimes against them. Can be crimes. All of their rights are affected. Crimes against lower castes. For example, your Hathras incident, your Unnao rape case, all these are what? They are caste violences. They are elements of caste oppressions. The caste oppressions as a resultant of breaking the chain of caste dynamics. Breaking the forces that are trying to change the nature of the caste in the Indian society. Because when the caste system is going to change and when they find that the inter-caste relations are becoming more liberal in Indian society, the dominant caste are scared of losing their economic and political clout. The dominant caste by themselves are feared of losing their brand of dominance. Now, when they are feared of losing their dominance, when they are feared of losing their economic and political clout, don't you think they'll further indulge themselves in your caste oppressions or caste violences? Yes. And another reason for caste oppressions is, it is because of weak criminal justice system. Why weak criminal justice system? What happened to that? What was that incident in Maharashtra where they killed two saints beating? Palghar. Palghar incident. What happened there? You had a policeman. What happened? Because there is weak criminal justice system. Or there is a nexus between politicians, police and criminals. That is what is highlighted by your Ohra Commission. Your NN Ohra basically highlights the reason for criminalization of politics, the reason for corruption in politics, the reason for casteization in politics is a nexus between your criminals, police and politicians. Now, one of the reasons for your caste oppressions to prevail is weak criminal justice system and also the political nexus and also the phenomena of casteization of politics. Now, in AP for 5 years, one community, for other years, other community. Now, the third community is trying to emerge. 1 year Kamma, 1 year Kapu. Now, 1 year Reddy. Third alternative is becoming Kapu. Now, you take Uttar Pradesh, you have scheduled castes and OBCs. You talk about Maharashtra, you have Marathas and other Mahars. And you talk about Karnataka, you have Okkalingas and other candidates. So it is all about casteization of politics. So it can so happen that what are the reasons for caste oppressions, whatever reasons I have told you.
When we are meeting a criminal, why do we attach all the different identities? If at all if a person commits a crime, so we need to see the crime in that isolated spirit.
Crime in the isolated spirit?
If at all, if an SC, like recently there was an incident like an SC or ST candidate has stolen something from an OC house. Or something. Also, he called him back and he has beaten him. And first thing what he done was he did a robbery, and it was not penalized for the first thing. And in the second case, he actually beat him, which shouldn't be the case. The upper caste has beaten the lower caste. So the second one was highly highlighted. It's true that they have actually violated the human rights, but even the first case also is wrong.
See, one thing you're supposed to remember here, that's what I said. That's what I said. The previous understanding or the traditional understanding of Indian system was completely in social connotation. We had social understandings. Now, most of your slangs are centered around the lower caste people. Why? It is such a bad thing. It is such a bad thing. Why? What sin they have done? They are also same human beings like us. But it is only that they were socially perceived as a marginal section. They were socially perceived as an alienated section. They were socially perceived as a lower section who are considered as untouchables. And that was the greatest scriptural error an Indian society has done. That was scriptural error, absolutely.
But at least now, if you are not associating him with a different identity, it helps us.
It is not so easy, my dear. It is not so easy. It is not so easy. You'll understand this when you become an IAS officer or IPS officer. You yourself will indulge in associating things like this or stereotyping. You may not voluntarily or you may not do it by yourself, but you will be forced to do all this. You will be forced to do all this. Then you cannot say, నేను మానవతావాదిని నేను రిజైన్ చేస్తాను. That will not happen. That cannot happen. Because at the end of the day, we are perceived as agents of change. Now, when you look at the Indian bureaucracy, we are driven by Weberian bureaucracy. When you talk about Weberian bureaucracy or the Indian model of bureaucracy, it is driven by Weberian bureaucracy, and Weberian bureaucracy has certain features like merit, like hierarchy, like impersonal management. Now, because of the features of Weberian bureaucracy, what basically happens is there is a kind of blind rationality that is set into the system, bureaucratic system. There is a kind of rigidity that is set into the system. And there is a kind of political masters, or there is a kind of political dictation that actually happens to the bureaucratic system. Now, because of the political dictation that is happening to the bureaucratic system, one of the inherent drawbacks of Indian bureaucracy is you don't have freedom of doing what you perceive to be. Now, at the end of the day, you as a civil servant has taken an oath to the allegiance of constitution. That means you have an inherent responsibility of upholding the foundational principles of constitution. And no constitution and no provision in Indian constitution, it talks about stereotyping a particular community. And bureaucracy or bureaucrats are perceived as agents of change because we are in a position of influence. Now, on real terms or in practical experiences, you will experience that the ambit of change that you can get in is restricted or is drawn margins by your political masters. Now, when you are ready to cross and wipe all those margins that are drawn by your political masters, be ready with your suitcases. Don't have a settled family. I'm telling you. These are not statements which I am giving about these settled suitcases. Kiran Bedi talks about it. Because the ambit of change that you can bring in a particular society with respect to your power of influence or position of influence, the margins and boundaries are absolutely drawn by political masters. He might be even your sarpanch, I'm telling you. Now, on what basis do you think these political masters are going to draw the margins or boundaries for your ambit of social change or ambit of the change that you can bring in? Is nothing but caste. Caste. Don't favor this community, favor this community. Now all the people of your community will come and say, Needi tenale, nadi tenale. Why? Because the scriptural error that is done by Indian society is, we have laid every damn thing, and we have laid every foundation of life, and we have laid every step of enculturation of Indian society with caste. That is why it is very difficult for Indian caste system to be ridden off. If you want to bring in change, at max what you can do? For example, I'll give you an example. Now you are a collector of a district. Now there is a caste conflict that is going on. There is a caste conflict. Now there is one school where the lower section, the Dalit cooks the food as part of your midday meal scheme. And because of this caste conflict, parents are not allowing the children to eat that food. At max, what you can do? Replace the cook?
To serve the at least children.
No, you're not supposed to, my dear. You're not supposed to, because when you replace, it is an escapist tendency.
But we cannot bring both the things, both the communities into consensus.
You can, because you're in power of influence. You go sit and eat that same food which that cook has cooked. At max, you can do this.
If at all, if you are from upper caste, we can do that. But if you are from same lower,
No issues, doesn't matter, because you are being branded as a district collector, not district collector bracket so and so community.
okay.
Your designation board will have district collector so and so name, district collector, but it will not have district collector bracket XYZ community. You are in a power of influence. Now when you are in a power of influence, it is all about your persuading skills. Now similar thing happens with respect to your corruption also. None of the civil servants would enter the services to be a corrupt officer. Trust me. However brutal that fellow is who is entering into civil services, he will not enter into civil services to be corrupt. Now suppose if he has cleared the exam with a motive of being a corrupt officer, the 2 years of training that you undergo will completely brainwash you. Trust me. That is the reason why you have 2 years of training. It is not that 1 year training, they'll kick you out and do whatever you want. They have mid-course trainings. They have mid-course corrections. Now after 1 year of training, if you still get polluted by your wife, by your children, by your husband, or by your father, by your parents, by your society, by your community, my dear Labasna, we are there. Come, we'll wash everything and send you fresh. That is the reason why your training is spread across 2 years. Now at least the impact of training will persist for 3 years, my dear. Minimum 3 years. Then if you are able to resist all the political influences, then you will enjoy a different life, I am telling you. Trust me. Trust me. You will enjoy a different life altogether if you are an upright officer. You would have a short-term hiccups, but ensure that prepare your family with respect to these short-term hiccups. Ensure your family. Say, my dear, this hiccups will be for 5 years, 6 years, please bear with me. Then after that, you will see a life of stardom, I am telling you. Now we have around 6,000 bureaucrats. We have 6,000 bureaucrats. How many bureaucrats by name we know? Or how many bureaucrats do we use as an example in your ethics exam? Or your governance exam? Or your essay writing? Very few. Why?
Who bought the change?
They could not sustain the political pressure. They have yielded to the pressure. Your second ARC very classically highlights this perception of yielding to the corruption pressure. Your second ARC, the fourth Ethics and Governance report, it says that the fundamental issue for the persistence of corruption in India is the low yielding capability of Indian bureaucracy. When you have a low yielding point, that means you are going to yield to every and any kind of political pressure by sarpanch, by his worker also. Now, that is the reason why bureaucracy is seen, or bureaucrats are seen as an agents of change. Agents of change provided you withstand that 5 years, 6 years of hardships. That's it. Just 5 to 6 years. And 5 to 6 years of hardship, you're going to have 30 years of a stardom life. Now, when you bear these 6 years, 7 years of pressures, political pressures, trust me, nobody will dare you to put pressure for next 20, 25 years. Because they know that you are not going to yield. Are vaadto endukura babu. I have personally seen my father like this. Initial, I think 8 years. I think when I was very young. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was sent to hostel, because of these transfers. You'll have hell lot of hiccups, my dear, hell lot of hiccups. To share my personal experience, I think in 94 he was in the custody of left-wing extremists. Your left-wing extremists had caught him. They did not leave him. He was in their custody for, I think, 4 days. 4 days. I think I was 94 means I was just 2 years old, and this incident was later on narrated by my mother to me. 94 means 1 year old. Sorry, not 2 years old. 1 year old. He was in left-wing extremist custody for 4 days. Why? It was a politically driven motive, because he is an honest officer. But the reason for him to come out of that custody was the whole of state machinery was run behind to save him, because he is an honest officer. If he was a corrupt officer, are pote ra babu, let him die. They'll say like that. Janal meeda padi tintuntadu pote. I'm telling you all these practical examples because I've seen them. Now he was brought out of that custody because he is an honest officer. Now again it repeated in 1998 also. 1998 also he was taken into custody. Now not for 4 days, he was in 1 week. Now just imagine the turmoil of the family. But the whole of the state machinery again ran behind. He was brought out. Why he was brought out? He was an honest officer. And believe me, you will not have a very smooth life. That is for sure. Take it for granted. But you will have the level of social reputation. Believe me, unbelievable it is. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. No politician also will have that kind of reputation if you are an honest officer. Okay. Now from where to where I came, where I was, caste operations, his doubts, yeah. Okay. So this is all about the caste system, and the caste operations are a consequence for your caste dynamics. They are consequence for caste dynamics.
A reaction of changing dynamics.
That's it. A reaction of changing dynamics. And this caste oppression as a reaction to the changing dynamics is manifested in the form of caste violence, caste subjugations, crimes, all this, different types, whatever I've told you, violence, crimes, stereotypings. Okay. So this is the broader understanding about caste.